whispering there a few minutes ago. I just had it in my head that I was in a church, but the atmosphere is lovely. So good morning everyone, welcome, and thank you for being here today to help share in the celebration of the life of Desmond. My name is Tina Hunt, I'm a civil celebrant, and I've been asked by the family to lead the ceremony today. We welcome Des's son Turlough and Turlough's sons Jack and Barney and his wife Sophie with their children, twins Sean and Derry and Barr. Des's daughter Mona from Horsham with her husband Chris and their children Sophie and Jay, and his daughter Lyr and her wife Vanessa are over from London. Thanks also to those who have travelled long distances, Bernie and Martin from the Canaries, Dominic and Rosemary from Dundalk, and many others who have travelled from near and far. Not present in person are his sister and family in New Zealand, Vera, Sean, Zita, Jane, and their families. They are present and watching via LiveStream, and a very special welcome to them and to Jack, his grandson. Also watching from afar are Jan, his beloved Karen's son, and Karen's family and friends throughout Germany. Des made many friends and colleagues through the years around the globe who are also joining this remotely, particularly the many friends in the EU, Canada, Belarus, Chile, and the UK. We gather today to celebrate Des's life, and we will begin with the music he loved most. As a student, Des took summer work in England. He attended many concerts in Manchester with his cousins. There he first saw Chris Barber's jazz band and loved it. He adored swing music. He was a good dancer, rumour has it, and no doubt was busting moves on the dance floor to swing bands and rock and roll of the time. So, for you, Des, this is Chris Barber's jazz band, swinging it up with Beale Street Blues. Wonderful choice there, I think everyone will agree. It's hard not to move around to that type of music. So at the request of the family, I would like to offer a quick biography of Des's life. Des was the eldest son of parents Maisie and Michael. He lived and studied in Cork with his sister Vera and his late brother Ormond. He was involved in the Scouts through to the end of college and retained the scouting spirit of adventure all his life. He also played rugby as a student and loved watching rugby right to the end. After college, he spent some time as a young teacher in Dundalk, where he made lifelong friends and, bizarrely, learned to ride and jump a horse, having been appointed as the horse riding teacher without ever having ridden before. He kept his horse riding abilities very quiet, however, until recently. Then spent 4 years teaching in Kenya and Nigeria, where Turlough and Mona were born, came back, and the second phase of his life began. For most of this second phase, Des taught in CBS Tramore from the early 70s for some 30 years. As he said, he might have been a teacher, but was never the teacher. Testament borne out by many of his former pupils' condolences, remembering him as a storyteller who inspired a lifetime love of history for many, and going extra lengths even in the day job, teaching economic history out of hours and bringing students out to look for flintstone tools at weekends. An independent thinker, going against a lot of the more traditional beliefs at the time and introducing a different approach to history. In parallel with the full-time job and family, Des also began a lot of extracurricular activities in teaching and local history, from co-founding the Waterford history magazine DCs in the 70s, and of course enjoying the pun on his own initials, to writing national curriculum textbooks, creating videos on local history, and too many other publications and articles to name. He started working with the European Baccalaureate in the early 90s, which became a perfect segue to the third stage. And once he retired early from the CBS, this and all other activities swooped in, and he was busier than ever before. He spent many summers on delightful jaunts around Europe, taking the most scenic route possible from one country to another for the baccalaureate, or even without that excuse, just doing delightful trips to Venice or many other locations around Europe with Karen. Catching him at home was very difficult for many years. He was always away having fun. Mining interest took over for this third phase. Des had been writing about mines for years and founded the Mining Heritage Trust of Ireland in the 90s with John Morris, spurring many further publications, workshops and conferences. Indeed, he was still working on the Handbook of Irish Mining with John Morris right through the last few years. But the creation of the Copper Coast Geopark in '98, in tandem with his beloved Karen and John Morris, was one of the highlights of the last decades. They founded this in the late 90s, and he only stepped back as director a few years ago. And of course, the European geoparks involved even more delightful trips to Europe, usually for him, Karen, and John Morris. Now that's more than enough for a professional life for anyone. But on the personal side, life was equally rich. As a teacher, an educator, and a historian, Des inspired and entertained generations of pupils, not just in the CBS or the European schools, but through a tremendous range of other lectures and talks, from workshops with local farmers on identifying historical remains in their fields, to talking to the Royal College of Physicians on the administration of their holdings. A rich legacy of articles on local and mining history is surpassed by his even richer personal impact on people's perceptions of history. But most will remember him as a consummate host, generous, with home-brewed beer and wine. That so many have mentioned the home brew in their memories of him, even though he'd stopped brewing decades ago, suggests the taste lingered long after. Thankfully, under Karen's influence, the brews gave way in latter years to industrial quantities of almost legal imported French wine. leading to never-ending carafe of doom sessions, stretching to dawn even in his 80s, out partying all his family. And he was an adventurer throughout, with absolutely no danger radar, making it astounding that he didn't get into more trouble than he actually did. Karen took on the role of guardian angel for the last few decades in saving him from himself. For example, in Sicily, where she threatened that she'd get out of the car and walk back if he tried to drive over the live lava stream that was flowing across the road in front of them. I don't know about you, but I was trying to picture that a little while ago, and I thought, no. Many summers were spent sailing, seemingly mostly stuck in ports with good pubs and bad winds. And exotic trips using the most complicated routes possible. The trip to Namibia involving RAF flights and a ferry to St. Helena. There were history cruises around sunny Svalbard and the White Sea. The stopovers in places like Thailand on the way to visit his sister in New Zealand, lecturing trips to Chile, and much, much more. All were appreciated with a deep relish of history, strange foods, and even stranger peoples. He was a humanist, tolerant of others' beliefs, other than the Trump administration. He found people endlessly fascinating and spent most weekends of the last 30 years volunteering with the Samaritans on the switchboard. He only stopped this year. Even in his work as a census taker, if he noticed people living in difficult circumstances, he looked to get support for them. He had a regular stream of visitors to the house, including those trying to save his soul. He always gave them his time and his hospitality, and probably himself saved more lost souls than the other way around. And now, music. Des had a fondness for the jazz greats and had a particular soft spot for Billie Holiday, who lived it as she sang it. Although a happy man himself, Billie Holiday's blues struck a chord, and he had a number of records by her. The family have chosen a more upbeat number today from Billie Holiday in honor of Des. It's The Way You Look Tonight.
Such is my foolish heart, lovely, never, never change. Keep that breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it, 'cause I love you just the way you look tonight.
Very difficult not to move around to that, I think, isn't it? Beautiful, really lovely. And now some friends and family would like to share their thoughts. And the first person we're inviting this morning is John Morris, friend and collaborator since the 90s, setting up the Copper Coast Tourism with Des and Karen, and co-authoring with Des the handbooks of Irish mining for several years. John?
Thanks, Tina. Oops. Give me a minute while I organise things here. Yeah. Once upon a time, some of you may not know that Des was an ardent mythologist as much as he was a historian. Once upon a time, during the summer of 1995, Des received a phone call from a complete stranger. Would he be interested in establishing an Irish Mining History Society? Ask a silly question. That phone call, which I made to him nearly 30 years ago, set in motion a chain of events and developments, but above all, an enduring and ever-deepening friendship and shared passion for all things mining history heritage related, but one in which he was and throughout remained the teacher, the unparalleled expert with an encyclopedic knowledge of Irish mining history, which he is always willing to share. The ensuing years saw the establishment of the Mining History Society of Ireland in 1996, morphing a few years later into the Mining Heritage Trust of Ireland, under which umbrella what was to become the Copper Coast Geopark was conceived, founded and developed. On behalf of CCG, it was he who received from a Greek general membership trophy number 5 on the first expansion of the European Geoparks network at a ceremony held in Seagree, Lesvos Island in 2001. Nothing remarkable in that, you might think, and while the inauguration ceremony passed off uneventfully, he nearly set off an international incident on foot of whatever exchange he had with said general subsequently. To say that Des's political opinions and those of a Greek general differed somewhat will be to put it very mildly. That crisis averted, he played a central role in the development and expansion of CCG, purchase and conservation of Annestown, the engine houses up the road, this derelict church building, promotion of Copper Coast as a regional tourism brand, and ultimately the formal incorporation of CCG to receive and manage its continued development. He was a remarkable ambassador for CCG and mining history wherever he went throughout Europe and further afield. For example, to Germany, Italy, Spain, the UK, Sicily, Poland, Czechia, and even as far as Chile, where the highlight for him was a visit organized by our host to the Pablo Neruda house in Valparaiso. His wry humor, sociability, and enjoyment of people won him friends near and far. Long live immortality, his favorite host, which only in more recent times received a subtle qualification, until I'm not. Des is no longer immortal in person, but he is immortal in the hearts and souls, and above all, in the minds of so many, not least amongst the generations of school students he taught, those who attended his extramural classes, and even to geriatrics such as myself. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. That sentence from a T.S. Eliot poem, to me, so neatly captures the very essence of the great historian that he was, forever probing, questioning mute documents to extract and interpret their subtleties, to deliver their meaning to us in the present. Many were the hours, days, events, even weeks we spent enjoyably probing archives in Ireland, London, and Swansea. Des was first and foremost a social historian, his primary interest being the lives of the people involved at all levels of the mining industry. Where others, myself included, saw stone and machinery or labour to interpret gaunt ruins, Des saw the people who had put them there. That was his passion. To me, he is and will forever remain the premier Irish mining historian of his generation, and I can only hope that he will be more widely recognised as such in the years to come. But Des has also left an enduring legacy to Bunman, where once indifference and disinterest in its mining history and heritage was the order of the day, that slowly transformed through his and Karen's efforts, the Mine Heritage Museum down by the pub, for example, a Copper Coast newsletter, into a growing awareness and appreciation of that history, into what is now a notable pride and sense of place, the entrance sign to the village down below, the conserved frontage of a terrace of miners' cottages, the name of the village pub, the Engine House, and his very own mythological creation, the Pipes of Bibe, just beyond Stage Cove. And by no means least, this building in which we are gathered today to bid farewell to Des. A building imbued with the spirit of so many whose lives fascinated him, from the Reverend David Dudney, rector of this one-time Church of Ireland church, to John Petherick, manager of the Bunman copper mines during their halcyon years of the 1830s and the 1840s, and an ardent supporter of Daniel O'Connell. To which we nearly added a South African couple at the time we were celebrating the acquisition of this building to serve as the Geopark Centre, which I think was in 2008. At that time, this was a dark, derelict, ivy-overgrown building with big gaping holes in the roof and garlands of ivy hanging through. The door was open, and the whole interior, these windows were blocked off with concrete blocks. The door was open, and a couple diffidently stuck their heads around the corner there, seeing the door open, and thought they'd walked in on a black mass, because all the way up the aisle here were candles laid by Paula and Eddie McCarthy, all the way up here to where we had, appropriately where Des now rests, a banquet table with more candles. Des, as typical of him, hastened down to the end there and brought them up and welcomed them and reassured them that there was nothing untoward going on here and explained what this was all about. That was Des all over, welcoming, supportive, encouraging, and generous of spirit, mind, and thought. We have laboured for many years upon our opus magnum, which Tina referred to, the 4-volume set, Handbook of Irish Metallic Mineral Production 1700 to 1921, which at least in Karen's company became known as the unmentionable. She got so tired of us talking about mining history in that book, she banished it from any discussion in her presence. And if we dared stray into it, she quickly deployed the Teutonic finger. No. No matter how it will lack your insights, Des, in sections yet to be completed, and your own inimitable turn of phrase, I shall do my best to complete all 4 volumes and dedicate them to your memory. Goodbye, dear friend. I shall miss you enormously. Turlough.
Thank you, John. I'd like to thank everyone here for arriving, and I'd like to thank all the people who weren't able to make it but are still attending remotely. Can everybody hear me? Des will miss this life. He loved it. he lived it to the full. We will miss Des, all of us gathered today, to celebrate his life. We will miss his conversations, his insight, his hospitality, his sense of the ridiculous. Des was a man who set himself worthy goals, worked out how to achieve them, and achieved them, mostly. He was a teacher and an activist. As a trade unionist, he strove to modernise teaching methodology for history students. He believed in developing critical skills so the students could learn to evaluate the reliability of source material and literature for themselves. In the end, he was overruled by the powers that be. This was still the 90s after all. He told me of the inspector who heckled him at a talk, saying, you sir, you are nothing but a glasshead. To this day, neither he nor I know exactly what a glasshead is. Returning home to Des during the Copper Coast years, I saw a community stretching from Tramore to Dungarvan develop an identity, prosperity, and international recognition. When I say that Des set himself worthy goals, this is what I mean. He was a great man. I could continue with his travels, his wit, his storytelling, and also his wisdom. Also his lack of wisdom. We all know Des. Des's wasn't always the purest form of wisdom. I'm not telling you anything you don't know about Des already, and we'll continue to share stories about him for many years to come. Des is no longer here to create anything himself. He has passed away. But he has been a role model for me and my family, his students, his colleagues, and this is what a father and teacher should be. Des still lives in all of us. I will continue to talk with Des, and I will hear him answer. We loved books, and we will continue to discuss books and the latest lunacies from across the Atlantic. He will answer, but there will always be the ache that he is no longer really here with us. When I find myself on narrow country roads, not knowing where I am, I will have Des beside me, urging me not to spoil the adventure by using a map. Yes, that really happened. Every weekend. He was a great believer in navigating by nose. It's a pity you can't be here anymore, Des. But you will always be with me, with my family, and all of us. Sleep well and safe journey.
And I think that Des would have appreciated that near disaster as well. My father was, above all else, a storyteller. My memory of him for all my life is most of it spent with a glass of wine in hand and saying, "Now, did I ever tell you about?" He often had, but it was always good to hear it again. The stories were incredible and always told with a wry sense of often self-deprecating humour, like the one of his sheer giddy terror when he was a mere teenager and camping in a fairy fort and hearing an eerie noise at night and thinking for the first time in his non-believing life of banshees, maybe they're real. No, it was just a couple of tree branches rubbing together in the wind. But the story that to me kind of sums him up is his patience of back when he was visiting me in London many, many years ago, one of my most disreputable places that I was staying with a dreadful flatmate. Des got back after a long day of doing research in Kew Gardens, and yes, we both got back quite late at night, just ready to crash, to discover that my hideous flatmate had decided to throw a little party of very strange and eccentric characters, which, in spite of a lot of discussion, kept on going until the wee hours, and kind of Des didn't get a lot of sleep that night. But he came down the next morning kind of And instead of effing and blinding or anything like that, he just kind of smiled wryly and said, all part of life's rich tapestry. And that was Des very much through to the end. He enjoyed life, he enjoyed the absurdities, he enjoyed all of life's tapestry in a way that I've rarely seen in anyone else. And we will miss him sadly. I'll hand back to Tina now.
I'd just like to say something very briefly myself, something personal, that I very often come out this way for a swim or a walk, and I don't think I will ever see the place the same way, having learned all I've learned about Des Cowman. We're coming to the close of this ceremony now, and on behalf of the family, I'd like to thank you all for sharing in this celebration of life. Des's family would love you to stay after the service to relax and share more stories. The centre will stay open for our use all day. Des's children will leave in a couple of hours for a private farewell at the crematorium. We will now bid farewell to Des with a parting tune. Des was very fond of Gilbert and Sullivan musicals, and he used to regularly take the family to local productions. But he enjoyed modern musicals as well, and was delighted to see Les Miserables on stage in London with his daughters. A couple of years ago, he discovered the movie Cabaret with Liza Minnelli, and he was totally blown away by that. So in the spirit of this, and his general attitude to life, Des would like to bid farewell to us all on a cheerful note, and it's Liza Minnelli with Cabaret. Thank you so much, everyone.
What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. Put down the knitting, the book and the broom. It's time for a holiday. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. Come taste the wine, come hear the band, come blow your horn, start celebrating. Right this way, your table's waiting. What good's permitting some prophet of doom to wipe every smile away? Life is a cabaret, old chum, so come to the cabaret. I used to have this girlfriend known as Elsie, with whom I shared 4 sordid rooms in Chelsea. She wasn't what you'd call a blushing flower. As a matter of fact, she rented by the hour. The day she died, the neighbors came to snicker. Well, that's what comes from too much pills and liquor. But when I saw her laid out like a queen, she was the happiest corpse I'd ever seen. I think of Elsie to this very day. I remember how she turned to me and said, what good is sitting all alone in your room? Come, hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. And as for me, I made my mind up back in Chelsea when I near.